I'm Dan Olsen. I'm excited to talk with you today about how to create a winning value proposition for your product. I'm excited to be a part of the virtual summit that Product School is putting on, and it's rare to get this many product managers together. So I like to start off with what's probably one of the most closely guarded product management secrets of all, the product manager's motto. Now, a few of you may be familiar with this already, but I'm guessing most of you aren't. For those of you that aren't, it's a bit like Spider-Man's motto. I'm sure we have a lot of Spider-Man fans out there who know what his motto is. Spider-Man's motto, as you know, is with great power comes great responsibility. Now, the product manager's motto is similar, but it's just a little bit different, and that is with great responsibility comes no power. And on the one hand, it's funny, but on the other hand, it's sad because it'd be nice if we had a little bit more power because we are responsible for a lot of things, as you know. If there's any gaps in the organization, a good product manager is going to fill those gaps. And so that's why I wrote my book, The Lean Product Playbook, to be a comprehensive guide to everything you need to know to be an effective product manager. And one of those key things that you need to do as product manager is actually ensure your product has a good value proposition. So that's going to be the focus of my talk today. Real quick, in case you're not familiar with my background, I started out with a technical background. I've been coding since I was a kid. And then I had an engineering job out of college, and then I went to business school at Stanford. And that's where I discovered this wonderful career choice of product management. And the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to do it. I hadn't done it before, so I had asked everybody at the time, hey, where's the best place to learn product management? Everybody said Intuit, so I was fortunate to be hired by Intuit and worked there for several years. After Intuit, I was a product leader at a few startups. Like a lot of people, I had the itch to do my own startup, so I was CEO and co-founder of YourVersion, which was a personalized news startup that was a TechCrunch award winner. And I also, 5.5 years ago, created a monthly speaker series group down in the peninsula where I bring in top product and UX speakers. What I've been doing now for over 14 years is being a product consultant and trainer. And I love sharing advice and best practices with product managers in talks like this. Here's a screen of some of my clients there. You can see I've worked with big companies like Facebook and Microsoft. I also work with other companies that are big now but were smaller earlier, like Box, Medallia, some of these other companies you may know about. So I work with a lot of B2B and B2C companies of various sizes. So the advice I'm going to share with you is relevant for all those different categories. And now the key framework for my book is the product market fit pyramid. And I want to share that with you because what I found is there wasn't really a good definition of product market fit out there. And being an engineer and wanting to be rigorous in how I think about it, after working on so many different products, I saw a pattern of conditions that need to be true in order to achieve product market fit. So the pyramid has 5 layers. Each layer builds on the layer beneath it. The bottom of the pyramid, the bottom layer, is the target customer. Whose life are we trying to make better? Whose pain points are we trying to address? Everything starts with this. The next layer up is for that customer, what are their underserved needs? Too many times product teams focus on features and solutions right away without really thinking about, hey, what are the customer needs and benefits that we want to deliver? So taken together, these 2 layers form the market. And if you look in an economics or marketing textbook, it'll say the definition of a market is a set of people that share a set of common needs. And you don't actually control the market. You can pick which market you want to go after. What you control are the product layers, and there are 3 product layers that sit above the market layer. The bottommost one is value proposition. That's what I'm going to be focusing on today. And that is, hey, which benefits are we actually going to promise to customers our product delivers? And how is it going to be better or different than the other products that are out there? That's really critical, and it's the essence of product strategy. The next layer up, building on that, is your feature set. That's the functionality that the user actually uses to get those benefits. And this is where the concept of MVP comes in, minimum viable product. And then the final top layer is user experience. That's what the user interacts with to use the functionality to get the benefits in your value proposition. And like I said, you basically are making hypotheses, assumptions, and decisions in those top 3 layers. And product market fit is basically just how well is the execution and hypotheses that you've made, how well does that resonate with the target market that you're going after? And in today's talk, I don't have time to go over all 5 layers or the lean product process. I'm going to focus on these 2 layers, which is thinking about customer needs and how to create a winning value proposition. An important concept when you're trying to address customer needs and deliver value is problem space versus solution space. Now, I've been talking about this concept since 2007. I'm excited to hear more and more people talking about the problem space. Let me explain what it is real quick. The problem space is basically a customer problem, need, or benefit that the product should address. If you're familiar, for example, with the user story template, as a blank, I want a blank so I can blank, that last part, so I can, the why the user cares about it and why it creates value, that's really the problem space statement. In contrast, solution space is a specific implementation or design designed to address that need. So if I said, hey, you know what, I want to make it easier to share photos, for people to share photos with their friends, that statement, make it easier to share photos with your friends, would be in the problem space. If the very next thing I said was, oh yeah, and I actually developed an app that does that, that app would be in the solution space. Or if I hadn't built an app, but my friend Bill had given me an awesome set of mock-ups for a great app, that set of mock-ups would be in the solution space. So that's the difference. And like I said, too many teams go rushing right into designing and building their product without spending enough time thinking about what are the customer problems that we're trying to solve. The example that I like to use to illustrate with this problem is basically when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the ballpoint pens that we were using here on Earth wouldn't work in space, right? Because there's no gravity and they need gravity. And it wasn't NASA. I want to say this right up front. If you Google this, you'll end up on an urban legend site that says, hey, this is all baloney. That's not the case. The key issue is who paid for this R&D initiative. And it wasn't NASA, and NASA didn't ask anybody to do it. But one of NASA's contractors, the head of that company, said, you know what? I think we can invent a pen that writes in space. And he went off on his own and decided to spend $1 million in R&D, and he invented a space pen. And I haven't used it in space, but I'm told they work just fine. Don't need gravity at all. Now the Russians, they also had to send their astronauts into space, but instead of sending their astronauts into space with space pens, they just gave them pencils. And you can actually buy a Russian space pen. It's basically a red pencil in a box poking fun at the space pen. So why do I tell this story? Well, the obvious first lesson is if these are both equally good solutions to the problem of being able to write in zero gravity, then obviously the one that didn't take $1 million and all that time and effort is better ROI. That's the obvious lesson. The more subtle lesson, though, is even when you're trying to focus on the problem space, it's really easy for solution space thinking to creep in. And I call that solution pollution. So when the head of the company said, hey, I think we can invent a pen that writes in space, and that was ostensibly his requirement or problem space, he had some solution pollution in there. I'm sure you picked up on what it was. He actually had the word pen baked in there. So he'd already kind of constrained the solution space to pens. It would have been better if he'd just been vague and said a way to write in space. That would have been better. And we can do even better than that by asking why. Like, why do astronauts even need to write in space in the first place, right? Well, they need to take down information and refer to it later. That would be an even better articulation of the problem space, because then now maybe we invent some crazy Siri Alexa thing that you talk to and it reads back to you, right? So that's the idea. We want to focus on the problem space first before we jump into the solution space. Let's talk about more of a software example. I used to work at Intuit on one of our big products is TurboTax, basically. It's an application, so it's clearly in the solution space, basically. It competes with another product, TaxCut, also clearly in the solution space. And what you want to do usually is start in the problem space and map to the solution space, but we can also take a product and try to reverse map what are the problems that it solves. And usually when I have a live audience, I ask people, hey, who's used TurboTax in the last year? And usually a lot of hands go up, not surprisingly, especially if it's around tax time. And I ask people, hey, why do you use it? What value did it provide? And I usually get a lot of different answers, like it helps me save me time, it's cheaper than a CPA, it's easy to use, all these kind of things, right? And so those are great specific examples. It can also be helpful just to know what's the general market problem we're trying to solve. And most people would describe it as, hey, it helps me prepare my taxes, helps me do my taxes, right? The other person that helped, and that's good to start out with, you want to basically peel the onion though, get more specific. The other person that really helped me appreciate this difference between problem space and solution space was actually Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit. And he was at Intuit when I was still there. And when he would speak to a group of people after his talk, he loved to do this where he'd ask the question, he'd ask the crowd, hey, who's the biggest competitor to TurboTax? And everyone would raise their hand, especially the new employees, and they would hope that he'd pick you and you'd get the answer right. And he'd pick you, and inevitably the person would say, it's TaxCut. He's like, no, you're wrong. It's pen and paper, because more Americans were doing their tax returns with pen and paper than any software at all. So that's the other thing, is those market needs, those customer needs don't change anywhere near as quickly as the solution waves that come and go. And it can help you really understand what are the true substitutes for the product and the problems that it's trying to solve. So what we want to do, again, is start in the problem space, get clear on what's the market opportunity that we're trying to address. In this case, help me prepare my taxes. That's good to know, but again, it's too high level. So we want to peel the onion and do what I call exploring the problem space and come up with what are all the different benefits we could address. At this point, it's important to kind of suspend disbelief and use divergent thinking and brainstorm to explore all the different corners of the problem space. For example, we might come up with check my taxes. Unlike pen and paper, it's a computer, so it can make sure you don't make any mistakes. It can help you file your taxes. Instead of having to print them and go to the post office, you can just push a button and e-file. It can help you maximize your deductions by asking you questions and saying, hey, did you know you could write this off? Did you know this was deductible? It could help you reduce your audit risk, right, by saying, hey, this looks a little risky. These are just 4 examples, and you would want to basically explore the space as much as you can. You'll notice that these follow a certain template, not to get too grammatical, but they all start with a verb: check, file, maximize, reduce. When you write your stories that way, it makes it really clear what is the product doing to create value for the user. The second thing you'll notice is whose perspective are they written from? They're not written from the product's perspective, technology's perspective, or the company's perspective. They're written from the user's perspective, right? My taxes, my return, things like that. And just so we can see the onion, you can envision it, we want to peel it. Each time you get more and more detailed, you're peeling and getting deeper and deeper in that onion. And that's the secret to achieving product market fit, is getting really, really specific about who your customer is and what their needs are, basically. And when you do that, you'll find that it's messy. When I do this TurboTax crowd example, I usually don't get the same exact answer from anybody. So it's messy in that you get a lot of different answers that you have to make sense of. But you'll find that there is some order to the messiness. And there'll be some benefits that just seem related. You're like, hey, they sound different right now, but they seem like they could be related. Let's take these 3. Help me prepare my taxes, reduce my audit risk, check my return. Those would be 3 things I might hear from different customers as to why they like TurboTax. Now, if I use that technique, the 5 whys technique, and I say, hey, can you tell me why it's valuable that it reduces your audit risk? Or why is it valuable that it checks your return? And I keep asking why. You can envision it as each time I ask why, there's a ladder, and I'm getting the customer to go 1 rung higher on the ladder each time. And what will happen sometimes is, even though these 3 benefits sound different, by the time they climb up that ladder, you realize, hey, they all ladder up to the same overall benefit. We call that a benefit ladder. And all these ladder up to the benefit of empowerment or confidence. The way that goes is, hey, before TurboTax, I'm not good with math, I don't know the tax code, but every year I got to do my taxes because it's required. It's very anxious and nerve-wracking for me, it takes a lot of time, I'm filling it out, I'm probably doing it wrong, and I turn it in, and I'm really nervous that maybe they're going to come after me and fine me. But then a friend recommended TurboTax, and it just kind of holds my hand and guides me question after question. Next thing you know, I'm done with my taxes. I feel a lot more empowered or confident. That's how that narrative might go. There can be a completely distinct benefit ladder. It has nothing to do with that. It just purely has to do with saving you time. Whether it's saving time preparing your taxes, like, hey, when I did it by hand, it took 5 days, and now it only takes 1 day. Or filing your taxes. Hey, I had to print it out and go to the post office, and now I can just e-file in a minute. And there could be a third distinct benefit ladder, has nothing to do with those 2, called save money. Right? Whether it's saving money by helping you identify tax deductions or saving you money compared to a CPA. And you'll notice I've spent a lot of time talking about TurboTax in the problem space. I've stayed out of the solution space, right? You can actually spend a lot of time in the problem space when you focus on it. And this is what I mean by a problem space definition. And I think this is one of product managers' main jobs. As I said in one of my earlier talks, developers develop, designers design. So what do PMs do? We define. And this is what defining is, defining a problem space, right? Again, we haven't said we're going to do all these. We just said these are the things that we could solve. Now, it turns out TurboTax happens to have a solution, a feature matched 1-for-1 with each one of these benefits. And there's a side benefit when you have that clear 1-for-1 mapping of feature to problem, and you have a well-named feature, then customers can figure out how it's going to create value just by seeing the name of the feature. So we want to create that problem space map and explore it. And that basically helps us go through this needs level. I have a whole separate framework on importance and satisfaction I don't have time to cover in today's talk that helps you figure out how well served or underserved the need is. But once we get clear on those needs, the next thing we want to do is go figure out what our value proposition is. And again, our value proposition is which customer needs, out of all the ones we talked about and explored as a team, which ones are we going to actually tell customers, hey, our product does this for you, and make a brand promise on? And secondly, how are we going to be better? How are we going to meet those needs in a way that's better than the competition that's out there? Now, before I moved out to Silicon Valley, I actually got a master's in industrial engineering where I studied lean manufacturing. And that's where I learned this great model, the Kano model. And normally it's applied, like I said, in lean manufacturing and quality. But I realized it's a great tool to apply to get really clear and crisp on your product value proposition. So I want to introduce the tool to you and then show you how we can use it. Now, the Kano model also talks about customer needs. On the horizontal axis, it talks about how fully does a product meet the need, from not met at all, 0%, all the way to fully met, 100%. That's the x-axis. Now, the y-axis is, as a result of how much the product meets the need that we're talking about, how much customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction results. And if this sounds a little complicated, the cool thing about the Kano model is it breaks all the features and benefits down into 1 of 3 categories. The first and easiest to understand is a performance benefit or feature. This is pretty simple. The more the product meets this need, the more customer satisfaction is created. The less the product meets this need, the less customer satisfaction is created, right? More is better, less is worse. If we're in the microprocessor business and our microprocessor was 20% faster than all the other ones, we'd be outperforming everybody by 20% and creating that much more customer value. Let's say I was shopping for a new car and I went to the showroom and I saw two cars and I liked the way the two looked pretty much about the same. And I looked at the little stickers on the window with all the specs and they seem about the same. But then I suddenly noticed that, hey, this car has twice the miles per gallon of this car. All other things being equal, I'm going to pick this car because for most people, fuel efficiency is a performance benefit, right? So that's performance. More is better, less is worse. The second category in the Kano model is must-haves. Now, having a must-have doesn't make anybody happy. You can see it flattens out. So if the product fully meets all the must-haves, it doesn't actually make the customer happy. But if the product doesn't meet the must-haves, then it makes them unhappy. That's the definition of a must-have. Sticking with cars again, say I went into the showroom, I saw a car, I love the way the car looked. I look at the spec sheet, great specs, great torque, great miles per gallon, all that jazz. But then I look inside the car and I realize, hey, this car doesn't have any seatbelts. I wouldn't get it because I'd be afraid of getting hurt or dying if I drove it, right? But if car A has 5 seatbelts and car B has 100 seatbelts, I don't say car B is 20 times better than car A. Once I have 1 seatbelt per passenger, I've kind of fully met the need and we're checked off. And by the way, you don't compete on must-haves. You have to have them, but you don't compete on those. The third category is delighters or wow features. Now, not having a delighter or wow feature doesn't cause a problem because no one's expecting it to be in the product. But by having a delighter, you can really create a lot of positive value. Not today, but we need to go back in time to when the first cars came out with GPS navigation. It was a delighter. What need did it meet? It met the need to get from point A to point B without getting lost, and hopefully quickly, right? That's the need. And before this GPS navigation, people would meet that need by asking for directions or trying to wing it or printing out, MapQuest or Google Maps. And then when the first cars came out with GPS navigation, it fundamentally changed how people got from point A to point B. You just put in the address and you got there. But as we know, more and more cars got GPS navigation over time. And Garmin and TomTom came out with their add-on units. And now we all just navigate with our phone, right? So that same need to get from point A to point B has been met by different solutions over time. And that just illustrates that this isn't a static picture. It's a dynamic picture where the needs and features migrate over time. So that yesterday's delighters become today's performance features, become tomorrow's must-haves. And the pace with which that happens just depends on the level of innovation and competition in your space. Okay, so why am I telling you all this about the Kano model? All you need to remember is there are 3 categories of product benefits or customer benefits, right? Must-haves, performance, and delighters. And what we're going to do is use those 3 categories with our problem space definition to create our value proposition grid. Now, the way we create this grid is we list for our market category 1 per row, what are the must-have benefits? And then 1 per row, what are the performance benefits? And then 1 per row, what are the delighter benefits? Step 2 is we create a column for each of our key competitors and we create a column for our product. Step 3 is we rate the competitors, right? And you can just use high, medium, low. If you're in the microprocessor business and you want to put in some gigahertz number, by all means use numbers. But as long as the high, medium, low makes sense across a row, it's perfectly fine to use that. Yes or no usually works great for must-haves and delighters. So in this case, both of our competitors have the must-have benefit, of course. Competitor A is the best at performance benefit 1. Competitor B is the best at performance benefit 2. They're both so-so at performance benefit 3. And competitor A has a delighter. This is the backdrop. This is the competitive landscape upon which we want to make our decisions. This is how we avoid having a Me Too product. And this is one of the most important things that product managers can help their teams drive. Where do we want to fight and be the best and play offense? Where are we going to seed? Because you can't, I run a lot of workshops where teams come back with high. And it's just not feasible. 1, you don't have the resources. 2, it doesn't create a clear positioning. And one of my favorite definitions of product strategy is it means saying no to something. So you got to say no to something. So given this backdrop, we might go with a value proposition like this for our product. Of course, we're going to have the must-have. We're going to be medium on performance benefit 1. We're going to say no to performance benefit 2 and not worry about that right now. We're going to try to be the best at performance benefit 3. Maybe we've identified a market segment that really values that performance benefit, or maybe we have some cool technology solution ideas as to why we can do a better job meeting that need. And then we have our own unique delighter 2. What matters the most, the whole point of this exercise is to come up with what's called your unique differentiators. And those are the performance benefits where you're going to outperform everybody else and any unique delighters that you have. That's like the special sauce of your product. And the next step in the process will be figuring out what your MVP feature sets to be and then your UX. So you want to make sure your MVP your product concept has the special sauce in it, right? So that's the idea. And some quick tips, by the way, I've kept this generic so you can envision what it might be for your product space. In a sec, we'll do a real world example. Some quick tips on how to create a winning value prop. Again, you don't compete on must-haves. I see every once in a while a company just launching an MVP that only has must-haves or a product concept that only has must-haves. Customers don't like that. It doesn't create any positive value for them. You need to be the best on at least one performance benefit. Don't try to reach for 2 or 3. I mean, if you can, great, but start out with 1. And that's what really matters the most. That's the minimum requirement. The second thing is, it's great if you also have a unique delighter. If you have a performance plus a unique delighter, like the last point says, that is a very powerful combination if you can achieve it. But at a minimum, you need to figure out how you're going to outperform. Okay, let's apply this value proposition grid to a real world product. And I like to pick Instagram because a lot of people are familiar with Instagram. Now, when Instagram first came out, there were actually a lot of other mobile photo sharing apps at the time. It was a crowded market, and yet they came in and quickly shot up to number 1. Why is that, right? And every once in a while you see that happen. A product that enters a crowded market and quickly shoots up to number 1. You don't see it that often, but every once in a while you do. I would argue in every example that happens, you can use the tool that I taught you today to reverse engineer and explain why that happened. So let's try to do that for Instagram. So again, the way we do that is we try to think of, hey, compared to the other mobile photo sharing apps that were out at the time, how did Instagram outperform those other apps? How do they have unique delighters? Now, when I do this in front of a live audience, the first answer I always get is filters, right? And we all love the Instagram filters. The next thing that I ask is, are filters a solution or a problem? And then people realize, oh, wait, it's a solution. That's totally fine. We just want to get clear on what the benefit is of the filters on the problem space side. So then I just use the trick, hey, why is that valuable to you as an Instagram customer? And I usually get answers like, well, it makes my photos look good, makes my photos look unique or creative, or makes me look like an artist or a professional photographer. All that's kind of different ways of saying the same thing of, hey, it makes my photos look good. Then I ask people, is that a performance or a delighter? And everyone says a delighter, because you didn't expect those awesome filters to be there at the time in Instagram because no one else had these awesome filters. But the interesting thing is now, you wouldn't think of launching a photo sharing app without filters, right? They become a must-have, right? And that shows that evolution over time. Okay, so we have one delighter, make my photos look good, supported by filters. There's actually another thing they did to make your photos look good that's a little more subtle, and it doesn't have to do with each individual photo. But when you take a photo on a phone, it's going to be a rectangle. It can be a tall, skinny rectangle, portrait mode, or it can be a wide rectangle in landscape mode. Now, either way you take it, it's going to look fine. But when you try to combine these portrait photos with these landscape photos in a single feed that's fixed width, you're going to run into an issue where you got to shrink these down. And the Instagram team didn't want the photos to have some be shrunken and some not. So they said, hey, let's skip all that mess and make it look really good by having a square aspect ratio. I remember I was upset the first time I used Instagram, like, hey, why are you cropping my photo? But that's why they crop it. So there's also the square aspect ratio that supports that overall benefit of making your photos look good. So we got our delighter. How about outperform? Now the trick to know you're talking about outperform is there's some numerical thing you can measure and say, these people do X and we beat them by Y% kind of thing. And so usually someone in the audience says something about ease of use, or that, hey, they uploaded the photos more quickly. And it's true, they actually did upload the photos more quickly than the other photo sharing apps that were out there at the time, by like 2 or 3 seconds. If those of you that used it back in the day may remember that. Now, if you work in computer science, you may be like, well, hey, Dan, the internet speed's the internet speed, and the photo's the size of the photo, so what gives? How did they do that? What's the special sauce? So what they did is actually a clever UX hack. They did a clever UX hack to make this work, basically, right? And they actually wrote a blog post about it, so let me explain how it worked. At the time, all those first generation mobile photo sharing apps, the way they worked is you'd open the app, it'd have a camera, you'd take your picture, and then it would render the picture in the app. And it would have an upload button at the bottom. By the time the photo rendered and the user looked at the photo and their finger made its way to the upload button, 2 or 3 seconds would pass. The Instagram UX team said, you know what, 90+% of the time people upload the photo anyway. Let's just start uploading it the second we take the photo. We'll still render it, we'll still have the button, so by the time the people's finger hit the button, those 2 or 3 seconds had passed and it would upload that much. It seemed like it uploaded that much more quickly. So that was their outperformance that they had, basically. All right, so now we have all the ingredients we need to create the value proposition to explain why did they suddenly shoot up to number 1. So again, here's our value prop grid. We have categories for must-haves, performance, and delighters. We have other photo sharing apps, and we have Instagram. We didn't even talk about the must-have. Obviously, if you're a photo sharing app, the must-have is let me share my photos. Everybody has that, of course. On the performance benefit, we said it was post my photos quickly, other photo sharing apps being low and Instagram being high because of that clever UX hack that they did. And on the Delighter, make my photos look good, supported by filters and square aspect ratio, which nobody else had and they had. And so what were their unique differentiators? It was these clear Outperform plus that clear Delighter. And like I said, you only need an Outperform, but when you have both an Outperform and a Delighter, it can be a very powerful combo. And usually when somebody shoots up into number one, that explains what's going on. So hopefully you can use these tools, the value prop grid, to come up with a compelling winning value proposition for your product. And the other powerful side effect of having clear value prop, it can often lead to very, very clear messaging and positioning. I don't know if anyone out there remembers what Instagram's tagline was back in the day when they first came out. I have it right here: fast, beautiful photo sharing. And what I love about this is just in 4 words, it's very powerful. They managed to pack their whole value proposition into just those 4 words. They have their must-have, photo sharing. They have their performance benefit, fast, and they have their Delighter, beautiful. So again, that's another side benefit, having a very clear value proposition, and I hope you can use these tools to improve your product. Thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. I have a QR code here on the screen. If you just pull out your phone and the camera and hold it up, it should redirect and come up with a link to a survey, a very short survey. If you could share with me what you liked, what could have been better, I'd appreciate it. If for some reason the QR code doesn't work, there's a link there. You can reach me on Twitter at Dan Olsen, and you can see me at my website at dan-olsen.com. Thanks a lot.